Ambassador Sarah Chen had been nothing but pleasant for the past 3 standard cycles. The Galactic Council had grown accustomed to her measured words, diplomatic smiles, and endless patience with even their most condescending remarks. The Zephyrians dismissed her species as aggressively accommodating, while the crystalline hegemony found humans tediously polite. That was before the Drakmori Confederation decided to test humanity's boundaries. The emergency session had been called after the Drakmori's unprovoked assault on the human colony of New Geneva. 3,000 civilians, men, women, and children, had been vaporized in what the Drakmori ambassador Thektar called a minor territorial correction. Sarah sat at the human delegation's modest table, her hands folded, listening as Thektar addressed the council with his characteristic arrogance. The humans, Thektar's voice boomed through the chamber's translation matrix, established their pathetic settlement within our ancient hunting grounds. We merely cleaned house. The other council members shifted uncomfortably. The Zephyrians' wing membranes rustled with nervous energy. The silicon-based hegemony representatives pulsed with uncertain light patterns. Even the ancient ethereals, beings of pure energy who rarely showed emotion, flickered with what might have been concern. Sarah remained still. Too still. Council moderator Vexhai, a towering insectoid from the Hive Collective, leaned forward. Ambassador Chen, your response to these allegations? For a moment, Sarah didn't speak. When she finally raised her head, something had changed. The diplomatic mask was gone. Her brown eyes had hardened to flint, and when she smiled, it was the kind of expression that made prey animals run. Allegations? She said, her voice carrying a new edge. Moderator Vexhai, I believe you mean confession of genocide. Tektar's scales rippled with amusement. Humans and their dramatics. 3,000 individuals of a species that breeds like parasites? Hardly genocide. Sarah stood slowly. Around the chamber, various species' threat detection instincts began firing warning signals they didn't quite understand. You know, she said conversationally, for 3 years I've sat in this chamber and listened to each of you describe my species as weak, primitive, overly emotional, and aggressively nonviolent. You've mocked our diplomacy as cowardice. You've dismissed our peaceful overtures as evidence of our inferior evolution. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. You want to know what's funny about that? Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. We let you think it, because we were trying to be good neighbors. We were trying to fit in. We thought maybe, just maybe, we could find our place in your little galactic community without anyone getting hurt. She turned to face Thektar directly. But you see, Ambassador, you've made a critical error in judgment. You mistook our kindness for weakness. You confused our restraint with inability. You thought that because we chose peace, we were incapable of war. The Drakmori ambassador's scales began to shift color, a sign of growing unease. Sarah activated her wrist display, and a holographic star chart appeared above the table. Red dots marked human colonies and stations throughout the galaxy, far more than any species had realized. While you've been dismissing us, Sarah said, we've been busy. 47 colonies, 12 major shipyards, 6 research stations developing technologies that would make your scale-crawling head spin, and a military fleet that we've kept very, very quiet. Murmurs erupted throughout the chamber. The ethereals pulsed with rapid bursts of energy, their equivalent of surprised chatter. But here's what really concerns me, Thektar, Sarah continued, and now her voice carried the cold precision of a scalpel. You killed 3,000 humans because you thought we wouldn't or couldn't respond. You calculated that humanity was too weak, too peaceful, too concerned with galactic opinion to retaliate. She leaned forward, placing her palms flat on the table. You calculated wrong. The hologram shifted, showing the current positions of human vessels. The council chamber fell deathly silent as the scope of humanity's hidden military presence became clear. Ships surrounded Drakmori space like antibodies targeting an infection. 18 hours ago you murdered children, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow audible to every being in the chamber. You vaporized families. You turned a thriving colony into radioactive dust because you believed humans were too civilized to seek justice. Thektar's scales had gone completely pale. So let me be very clear, Sarah continued, straightening to her full height. Humanity's Courteous mode is now officially offline. You have 72 standard hours to surrender the fleet commanders responsible for the New Geneva massacre. Pay reparations to the families of every victim, and publicly apologize to the human species. If you refuse, she smiled again, and this time even the ethereals recoiled. Well, you wanted to see what humans are capable of when we stop being polite. The choice is yours. The chamber erupted as delegates frantically activated their communication systems. Through it all, Sarah stood calmly, watching Thektar's dawning realization that his species had just learned the difference between humanity's peaceful nature and its actual capabilities. Moderator Vexhi's mandibles clicked nervously. Ambassador Chen, surely we can resolve this through diplomatic channels. The diplomatic channels closed the moment they opened fire on civilians, Sarah interrupted. We tried peace. We tried understanding. We tried being the accommodating neighbors you could ignore or dismiss at will. She gathered her materials with mechanical precision. But understand this, all of you. Humanity didn't evolve as prey. We evolved as persistence hunters. We evolved to chase our targets across continents, across seasons, across years if necessary. And we've never, in our entire history, forgotten how to hunt. As Sarah walked toward the chamber exit, her final words echoed through the translation matrix. 72 hours, Thektar. The clock is ticking. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the human ambassador left, finally understanding that they had mistaken humanity's greatest strength, their capacity for mercy, as weakness. They would not make that mistake again.